The sound of shattering glass echoed through the modest apartment in Lagos as Amara's body slumped against the wall, blood trickling from her temple. Her 6-month pregnant belly heaved with shallow breaths as her vision blurred. Standing over her, swaying with the stench of cheap gin on his breath, was Chaik, her husband of 4 years. His fists were still clenched, his eyes wild with rage. "You think you're better than me?" he screamed, his words slurring together. "You think because you wear those fancy clothes to work, you can disrespect me? Disrespect Gloria." Amara tried to speak, to plead for their unborn child, but darkness crept in from the edges of her consciousness. The last thing she heard before everything went black was the sound of her phone buzzing on the floor, a message from her colleague reminding her about tomorrow's court session where she would preside as judge over 3 critical cases. Chaik stumbled backward, suddenly realizing what he had done. His wife lay motionless on the floor, a pool of blood forming beneath her head. He had beaten her before, yes, but never like this. Never until she stopped moving. But how did it come to this? How did a love story that began with so much promise end with a pregnant woman lying unconscious on her living room floor while her drunk husband panicked above her? 5 years earlier, Amara Okonkwo was a brilliant law student at the University of Lagos, known for her sharp mind and unwavering dedication to justice. She came from a humble family in Enugu. Her father was a taxi driver, her mother sold vegetables at the local market. Education was their escape, and Amara carried that hope on her shoulders like a sacred burden. She met Chaik at a friend's birthday party in Ikeja. He was charming, funny, and attentive in ways that made her feel seen for the first time in her life. Chaik worked as a sales representative for a pharmaceutical company, and while his job wasn't glamorous, he spoke about his dreams with such passion that Amara believed in him. He wanted to start his own business, he said. He wanted to build something meaningful. Their courtship was a whirlwind of stolen moments between her law classes and his sales routes. He would surprise her with small gifts, a book she mentioned wanting, her favorite chin-chin from the vendor near campus, handwritten notes tucked into her bag when she wasn't looking. Her friends warned her that he seemed too good to be true, but Amara dismissed their concerns. She had finally found someone who loved her not for what she could become, but for who she was. They married a year after her graduation, just as she began her career as a junior attorney. The wedding was small but beautiful, held in her family's church in Enugu with 50 guests who danced until the early morning hours. Chaik promised her the world that day. He promised her partnership, respect, and a love that would weather any storm. For the first year, he kept those promises. They lived in a small flat in Surulere, saving money and building their future together. Amara worked long hours at the law firm, taking on difficult cases that others avoided. She specialized in domestic violence cases, fighting for women who had no voice, women who reminded her of her own mother who had endured years of hardship. But something shifted when Amara received her promotion. After 3 years of relentless work, she was appointed as a magistrate judge, one of the youngest in Lagos State. It was a moment of tremendous pride for her family, for her community. Her face appeared in newspapers. Colleagues congratulated her. Strangers recognized her in the streets. Chaik smiled at the celebration party, but Amara noticed something cold in his eyes that night. Something that hadn't been there before. The first time he hit her was 6 months after her appointment. They had argued about money. Amara had refused to give him 20,000 naira for what he vaguely described as a business investment. She had seen their bank statements. She knew about the bars he frequented, the drinking that had become a nightly ritual rather than an occasional indulgence. When she questioned him, he slapped her across the face. The shock hurt more than the physical pain. She stood there, hand pressed to her burning cheek, staring at this stranger who wore her husband's face. He apologized immediately, falling to his knees and weeping. He blamed the stress of feeling inadequate. He blamed the pressure of being married to someone so successful while his own career stagnated. He blamed everything except himself. Amara forgave him. She told herself it was a one-time mistake, that the man she married was still in there somewhere beneath the insecurity and alcohol. She was wrong. The violence became a pattern, always fueled by alcohol, always triggered by perceived slights to his manhood. And through it all, Amara hid her bruises beneath long sleeves and concealer, maintained her composure in court, and pretended that her marriage wasn't slowly killing her spirit. Then she discovered she was pregnant, and for a brief moment, she allowed herself to hope. Maybe a child would change him. Maybe fatherhood would bring back the man she fell in love with. Instead, it made everything worse. Because while Amara carried his child, Chike had found comfort in the arms of someone else, a woman named Gloria who worked at his favorite bar, who laughed at his jokes and made him feel like the man he thought he deserved to be. Tonight, Amara had confronted him about Gloria after finding messages on his phone. And tonight, Chike had shown her exactly who he had become. The neighbors called the ambulance as Chike stood frozen in their living room, staring at his hands as though they belonged to someone else. By the time the paramedics arrived, Amara had been unconscious for 7 minutes. Her pulse was weak. Her baby's heartbeat was fading. As they loaded her onto the stretcher, one of the paramedics recognized her face from the courthouse. His eyes widened with shock. "This is Judge Okonkwo," he whispered to his partner. Chike heard those words, and for the first time that night, fear truly gripped his heart. What have I done? Before you find out what happens next, if you're enjoying this story, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next chapter. And drop a comment below telling us where you're watching from. The fluorescent lights of Lagos University Teaching Hospital burned harsh and unforgiving as doctors rushed Amara into the emergency room. Dr. Adebayo, the head of the trauma unit, took one look at the swelling on her head and the bruises covering her arms and knew immediately what kind of case this was. He had seen it too many times before, women brought in broken by the men who claimed to love them. "Get me a CT scan now," he barked at the nurses. "And somebody call obstetrics. We have a pregnant woman with severe head trauma. The baby might not make it." In the waiting room, Chike sat with his head in his hands, still reeking of alcohol. 2 police officers stood nearby, watching him with barely concealed disgust. When the ambulance had arrived, the neighbors had told them everything. The screaming, the sounds of violence, the history of fights that everyone heard but no one had reported until now. Officer Funmileo Bassi, a stern woman in her 40s, approached Chike with her notepad. "Mr. Chike Okafor, you need to come with us to the station for questioning." Chike looked up, his eyes bloodshot and confused. "I need to stay here. I need to know if my wife is okay. If my baby—" "Your wife." Officer Bassi's voice dripped with contempt. "The wife you beat unconscious? That wife." The words hit Chike like a physical blow. The reality of what he had done was beginning to penetrate through the fog of alcohol. "It was an accident. I didn't mean to, she just kept pushing me, talking about Gloria, saying things." "So you hit a pregnant woman because she confronted you about your mistress?" The other officer, a younger man named Taiwo, stepped forward. "Do you know what you've done? Do you have any idea who your wife is?" Chike shook his head, not understanding the question. Of course he knew who Amara was. She was his wife, the woman he had married, the woman who had somehow become a stranger to him over the years as her success grew and his own life seemed to shrink. Before the officers could explain, Dr. Adebayo emerged from the emergency room, his face grim. "Is there family here for Amara Okonkwo?" Chike jumped to his feet. "I'm her husband. How is she? How's the baby?" Dr. Adebayo's jaw tightened when he looked at Chike, taking in his disheveled appearance and the guilt written across his face. "Your wife has a severe concussion and significant brain swelling. We've induced a medical coma to give her brain time to heal. As for the baby—" He paused, his voice heavy. "The fetal heartbeat is weak. The next 24 hours are critical. If the stress on her body doesn't decrease, we may lose the child." The words landed like hammer blows. Chike felt his knees weaken. "But they'll be okay, right? You can fix this." "Fix this?" Dr. Adebayo's professional composure cracked slightly. "You put your pregnant wife in a coma. There's only so much medical science can do when someone tries to kill." "I wasn't trying to kill her," Chike shouted. "It was an accident. I love my wife." "Then you have a strange way of showing it," Officer Bassi interjected. "Mr. Okafor, you're under arrest for assault and attempted murder. If that baby dies, we'll add manslaughter charges." The handcuffs clicked around Chike's wrists with a finality that made everything real. As they led him away, He craned his neck back toward the emergency room doors. "Tell her I'm sorry," he pleaded with Dr. Adebayo. "Tell her I didn't mean it. Tell her." But the doctor had already turned away, returning to the woman whose life hung in the balance because of the man who had sworn to protect her. In the ICU, Amara lay perfectly still, machines breathing for her, monitoring her vital signs, keeping her tethered to life. Her belly rose and fell with mechanical precision, and inside, their daughter. Yes, they had learned it was a girl just 2 weeks ago, fought her own battle for survival. Word spread quickly through the courthouse the next morning. Judge Amara Okonkwo, known for her fierce advocacy for domestic violence victims, was herself lying in a coma after being beaten by her husband. The irony was not lost on anyone. The woman who had sent dozens of abusers to prison, who had granted protection orders to countless women, who had stood as a symbol of justice for the voiceless, she had been suffering in silence behind closed doors. Chief Judge Oluyemide Adewale called an emergency meeting of the judicial staff. He stood before them, his weathered face showing every one of his 63 years. "I know you've all heard about Judge Okonkwo. What happened to her is a tragedy, but it's also a reminder that domestic violence knows no boundaries. It doesn't care about your education, your position, or your power. It can happen to anyone." Amara's closest colleague, Judge Ngozi Mbala, wiped tears from her eyes. "I saw her last week. She wore a turtleneck even though it was so hot. I thought it was strange, but I didn't ask. I didn't want to pry. God forgive me, I should have asked." Others shared similar memories. The long sleeves in summer, the careful makeup, the way Amara would sometimes flinch when someone approached her too quickly. The signs had been there, painted in bruises and concealed beneath professionalism, but everyone had been too polite or too busy to see them. Meanwhile, in a small flat in Yaba, Gloria sat on her bed, scrolling through social media as news of the incident spread online. Someone had leaked the story to a popular blog, and now everyone was talking about the judge who had been beaten into a coma by her husband. Her phone rang. It was Chaik, calling from the police station. She stared at the screen, watching it ring and ring. She had known he was married. He had never hidden that fact. But he had told her his wife was cold, distant, that they were practically separated. He had painted himself as a victim, trapped in a loveless marriage with a woman who cared more about her career than her husband. He had never mentioned that his wife was pregnant. He had never mentioned that he was violent. He had never mentioned a lot of things. Gloria let the call go to voicemail. Then she blocked his number. Whatever was happening with Chaik Okafor was no longer her problem. She had her own life to worry about, her own survival to ensure. She couldn't afford to be dragged into this mess. Back at the hospital, Amara's parents arrived from Enugu, her mother wailing in the hallway as her father stood stone-faced, his hands trembling with rage. They had trusted Chaik with their daughter's life, their precious miracle who had lifted their family out of poverty through her intelligence and determination. "Where is he?" Amara's father, Emmanuel, demanded of the police officers stationed outside the ICU. "Where is the man who did this to my daughter?" "He's in custody, sir," Officer Bassi replied gently. "He'll face justice." "Justice?" Emmanuel's voice cracked. "My daughter is the one who delivers justice. She fights for women who can't fight for themselves. And all this time, she needed someone to fight for her." In her medically induced coma, Amara couldn't hear her father's anguish or her mother's prayers. She couldn't feel her daughter's weakening kicks or see the machines that kept them both alive. She floated somewhere between consciousness and darkness, trapped in a space where memories played like fragmented films. She remembered the first time Chaik hit her. She remembered deciding to stay. She remembered all the moments she could have left, all the times she could have asked for help, all the opportunities she had missed because she was ashamed, because she was a judge, because she was supposed to be strong enough to fix her own problems. But some problems can't be fixed with strength alone. Some problems require the courage to admit you need help, even when you're the person everyone else turns to for salvation. What do you think? Could Amara have done anything differently? Have you or someone you know ever been in a situation like this? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story might help someone else who's struggling. And if this story is touching your heart, please like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear it. 3 days passed, and Amara remained in her coma. The swelling in her brain had decreased slightly, but not enough for doctors to risk bringing her back to consciousness. Her daughter, however, was proving to be a fighter. Against all odds, the baby's heartbeat had stabilized, growing stronger with each passing hour as if determined to survive the violence that had nearly ended both their lives. Chaik sat in a holding cell at the Panti police station in Yaba, sharing the cramped space with 6 other men awaiting trial. The walls were stained with years of despair, and the air was thick with the smell of unwashed bodies and hopelessness. He had sobered up completely now, and with sobriety came the full weight of what he had done. The other inmates had heard whispers about his case. In a strange twist of prison hierarchy, men who had committed armed robbery and theft looked down on him with contempt. Even criminals had a code, and beating a pregnant woman violated something fundamental in the human conscience. "You're the one who beat the judge?" an older man named Kazim asked, his voice rough from years of smoking. "The one who fights for women?" Chaik nodded miserably, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Kazim shook his head in disgust. "My sister went to that judge 2 years ago. Her husband used to burn her with cigarettes, beat her in front of their children. Judge Okonkwo gave her a protection order, sent that bastard to prison. My sister has a new life now because of her." He spat on the ground near Chaik's feet. "And you're worse than an animal." The words cut deeper than any physical blow could. Chaik pulled his knees to his chest, making himself as small as possible in the corner of the cell. How had he become this person? When had he crossed the line from the ambitious young man with dreams to the monster who put his own wife in a coma? He tried to trace the path of his descent. It had started so gradually, a drink after work to ease the stress of rejection, of watching his wife's star rise while his own career flatlined. Then 2 drinks. Then 3. Then entire bottles that made the world blur enough that he could forget he was failing. The jealousy had crept in like poison. Every time Amara came home with a new achievement, every time someone recognized her in public, every time she received praise, it felt like a personal attack on his masculinity. In his twisted logic, her success meant his failure. Her strength meant his weakness. Her independence meant his irrelevance. Gloria had been an escape from those feelings. With her, he could pretend to be the man he thought he should be. Confident, in control, desired. She didn't know about his failures or his insecurities. She only knew the version of himself he performed after enough drinks had drowned out the truth. But Gloria was gone now. She had abandoned him the moment things got difficult, proving that whatever they had was nothing more than an illusion built on lies and alcohol. A police officer appeared at the cell bars. "Chaik Okafor, you have a visitor." Chaik looked up in surprise. He hadn't expected anyone to come. His own parents had disowned him when they heard what he had done, his mother crying on the phone that she had raised him better than this, his father's silence speaking volumes. The visitor was his younger sister, Chioma, who had traveled from Abuja when she heard the news. She stood in the visitation room with tears streaming down her face, her arms crossed protectively over her chest. "How could you, Chaik?" she whispered as soon as the guard gave them privacy. "How could you do this to Amara? To your own child?" "Chioma, he started, but she cut him off. Don't you dare make excuses to me. I loved Amara like my own sister. Do you remember when I was applying to university and couldn't afford the application fees? Amara paid for all of them without you even asking her. When I needed somewhere to stay during my internship in Lagos, she welcomed me into your home for 3 months. She treated me like family." Chaik closed his eyes, the shame burning through him. He had forgotten about those things, or rather, he had chosen to forget. It was easier to resent Amara when he focused only on the ways he felt diminished by her, rather than remembering all the ways she had loved him and his family. "The family is disgraced," Chioma continued, her voice breaking. "Do you know what people are saying? That the Okafors raised a beast. That our parents failed. Mama can't even go to market without people whispering. Papa has locked himself in his room for 3 days. I'm sorry," Chaik managed, the words inadequate and hollow. "Sorry doesn't fix this. Sorry doesn't bring Amara out of her coma. Sorry doesn't erase what you've done." Chioma leaned forward, her eyes blazing with anger and grief. I came here to tell you one thing. I hope she leaves you. I hope when she wakes up, she takes that baby and runs as far from you as possible. And I hope you spend a very long time in prison thinking about what you've destroyed." She stood up to leave, then paused at the door. "The sad thing is, Chike, Amara loved you. Even with all your problems, even when you started drinking, even when you became someone none of us recognized, she still loved you. She stayed because she believed in the man you used to be. And you repaid that love by nearly killing her." After Chioma left, Chike broke down completely, his sobs echoing off the concrete walls of the visitation room. A guard eventually came to escort him back to the cell, showing no sympathy for the broken man shuffling before him. That evening, at the hospital, something remarkable happened. Amara's fingers twitched. It was a small movement, barely noticeable, but the nurse monitoring her vitals saw it and immediately called for Dr. Adebayo. "She's showing signs of regaining consciousness," the doctor explained to Amara's anxious parents. "Her brain activity has increased, and the swelling has reduced significantly. We're going to start slowly bringing her out of the coma over the next 48 hours. Amara's mother, Patience, clutched her husband's hand and began to pray in Igbo, thanking God for his mercy. Emmanuel stood stoically, but tears rolled down his weathered cheeks. Their daughter was coming back to them. News of Amara's improvement spread quickly through the courthouse and beyond. Judge Ngozimbala organized a prayer vigil, and more than 100 people gathered at the hospital's chapel. Colleagues, women Amara had helped over the years, community members who had followed her career with pride. Among the crowd was a young woman named Blessing, who stood at the back with her 2 children. 5 years ago, Blessing had appeared in Judge Okonkwo's courtroom, her face swollen from her husband's fists, her arm in a cast. Amara had not only granted her a protection order but had connected her with resources for housing, job training, and counseling. Today, Blessing owned a small catering business and had built a new life free from violence. "Judge Okonkwo saved my life," Blessing told a journalist who was covering the vigil. "When I stood in her courtroom, I felt seen for the first time. She didn't just hand me papers and send me away. She made sure I had what I needed to actually escape and rebuild. Now she needs us. All of us she's helped. We need to stand for her the way she stood for us." The journalist's article went viral, shared thousands of times across social media. It included testimonies from dozens of women whose lives Amara had changed. The irony of a domestic violence advocate suffering abuse herself sparked national conversation about how power and education don't protect anyone from intimate partner violence, and how the shame and stigma keep even the strongest women trapped. Back in his cell, Chike learned about the vigil from another inmate who had a smuggled phone. He heard about the hundreds of people praying for Amara, about the women sharing their stories of how his wife had saved them. Each testimony was another weight added to the crushing burden of his guilt. He had known Amara was a judge. He had known she worked on domestic violence cases. But he had never truly understood the scope of her impact, the number of lives she had touched, the legacy she was building. He had been too consumed by his own inadequacy to see the magnificent woman he had married. And now, as she fought her way back to consciousness, Chike faced a terrifying question. If Amara survived, if she woke up and recovered, what would she do about him? Would she forgive him as she had before? Or would she finally do what she had counseled countless other women to do? Leave and never look back? The answer would determine not just his future, but the future of their unborn daughter and the meaning of justice itself. Because this time, the victim and the judge were the same person, and the whole nation was watching to see what she would decide. On the 5th day, Amara's eyes opened. The world came into focus slowly, blurry at first, then sharpening into the sterile white ceiling of the hospital room, the steady beep of monitors, the concerned face of Dr. Adebayo leaning over her. "Welcome back, Judge Okonkwo," he said softly, relief evident in his voice. "Don't try to speak yet. You've been through quite an ordeal." Amara's hand instinctively moved to her belly, and panic flooded through her when she felt the monitoring belt strapped around her stomach. Her baby. Was her baby alive? Dr. Adebayo saw the fear in her eyes and quickly reassured her. "Your daughter is fine. She's a fighter, just like her mother. Strong heartbeat, good movement. You're both going to be okay." Tears streamed down Amara's face as the memories crashed back. Chike's rage, the smell of alcohol, his fists, the pain, and then nothing. She had thought she was going to die. She had thought her baby was going to die. And in that moment of darkness, she had made a decision that she now had to find the courage to keep. Her parents rushed into the room moments later, her mother sobbing with joy, her father trying to maintain composure but failing miserably. They held her hands carefully, mindful of the 4 lines and monitors, and whispered prayers of thanksgiving. "Where is he?" Amara asked, her voice hoarse from days of intubation. The room fell silent. Her father's jaw tightened, and her mother looked away. Dr. Adebayo cleared his throat. "Your husband has been arrested and is in police custody. He's been charged with attempted murder and assault. Given your position as a judge, the case has received significant attention." Amara closed her eyes, feeling the weight of that reality. She was the victim now, not the judge presiding over someone else's tragedy. This was her life, her pain, her decision to make. Over the next few days, as Amara regained her strength, visitors came in a steady stream. Judge Ngozi sat beside her bed and held her hand without speaking for a long time, both women understanding the complex emotions that words couldn't adequately capture. Blessing came with a basket of food she had prepared herself, her children drawing colorful pictures for the judge who helped our mommy. Police officers came to take her statement, their voices gentle but their questions necessarily difficult. And through it all, Amara remained silent about what she would do when Chaik faced trial. The media speculation was intense. Would the judge who had shown no mercy to abusers extend that same justice to her own husband? Or would love and the sanctity of marriage cloud her judgment? Chaik's attorney, a young lawyer named Adeyemi who had taken the case pro bono for the publicity, filed for bail. The hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks after Amara woke up, and the courtroom was packed with journalists, activists, and curious onlookers. The presiding judge was Justice Babatunde Coker, a stern man in his late 50s who had worked alongside Amara in the past and respected her greatly. He looked down at Chaik standing in the dock, disheveled and broken, and barely concealed his disgust. "Mr. Okafor, you stand accused of attempted murder and aggravated assault against your wife, who also happens to be a respected member of this judiciary. How do you plead?" Chaik's voice was barely audible. "Guilty, Your Honor." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. His own lawyer looked shocked. They had planned to plead not guilty and argue for a lesser charge. But Chaik had made his decision. He was tired of running from the truth. "I did everything I'm accused of," Chaik continued, his voice growing stronger. "I beat my pregnant wife. I put her in a coma. I nearly killed my own child. I have no excuse, no justification. I was drunk, I was angry, I was jealous of her success, and I took all of that out on the woman who loved me. I deserve whatever punishment this court decides." Justice Coker was silent for a long moment. "Your guilty plea is noted, Mr. Okafor. However, given the severity of these charges and the victim's current condition, I am denying bail. You will remain in custody until sentencing. This court is adjourned." The gavel struck with finality, and Chaik was led away. As he passed through the courtroom doors, he caught sight of Chioma in the gallery. His sister's face showed no sympathy, only a sad resignation that the brother she once knew was truly gone. News of Chaik's guilty plea reached Amara at the hospital. She sat in her bed, one hand resting on her belly where their daughter kicked with increasing vigor, and tried to process the complex tangle of emotions. Relief that he had admitted the truth. Grief for the marriage that had died long before that violent night. Anger at the years she had wasted hoping he would change. And underneath it all, a persistent ache of loss for the man she had fallen in love with, the man who no longer existed, if he ever truly had. Judge Ngozi visited that afternoon and found Amara staring out the window at the Lagos skyline. "How are you feeling?" Ngozi asked, settling into the chair beside the bed. "Confused," Amara admitted. "I've sentenced so many men like Chaik. I've looked women in the eye and told them their husbands would face justice. I've given speeches about zero tolerance for domestic violence. And yet he was your husband," Ngozi finished gently. "And you loved him. That doesn't make you a hypocrite, Amara. It makes you human." "I stayed," Amara whispered, her voice breaking. "Even after the first time he hit me, I stayed. I told myself all the things I've heard victims say 1,000 times. That he was sorry, that it wouldn't happen again, that I could fix him if I just loved him enough. I became one of them, and I was too ashamed to ask for help. Ngozi squeezed her hand. The women you've helped, they'll understand. In fact, I think your experience will make you an even more powerful advocate. You've walked in their shoes now. You know exactly what it takes to leave, how hard that decision is, even when you're strong and educated and powerful. Amara nodded slowly, tears streaming down her face. I've made my decision about Chaik. I know what I have to do. What's that? I'm going to attend his sentencing. I'm going to face him. And then I'm going to tell the world exactly what it's like to be a victim of domestic violence, regardless of who you are or what position you hold. If my story can help even one woman find the courage to leave, then maybe something good can come from all this pain. 3 weeks later, Amara was discharged from the hospital. She had recovered remarkably well, though the doctors warned her to take things slowly. Her daughter was thriving, kicking so vigorously that Amara sometimes couldn't sleep at night. She had decided to name her Chidinma, God is beautiful, because despite the darkness of her conception and the violence that had nearly ended her life, this child was a gift, a reminder that beauty could emerge from ashes. Amara moved back into her parents' home in Enugu, unable to return to the apartment where Chaik had attacked her. Her father had already arranged to have her belongings moved and the lease terminated. She would start fresh, build a new life for herself and her daughter. But first, she had to face Chaik one final time. The sentencing hearing was scheduled for mid-November, and Amara made the journey back to Lagos despite her advanced pregnancy. She wore a simple blue dress that her mother had made for her hair pulled back in a neat bun, her face free of makeup except for a touch of lipstick. She wanted to look like herself, not like the judge everyone expected her to be. When she entered the courtroom, silence fell. Everyone stood, the lawyers, the journalists, the activists who had been following the case. Even Chaik, standing in the dock, straightened when he saw her. Their eyes met across the room, and for a moment, the years fell away. She saw the young man who had courted her with handwritten notes and chin-chin. He saw the brilliant law student who had believed in his dreams. But those people were gone, replaced by a victim and her abuser, a broken woman and the man who had broken her. Justice Coker addressed the court. Before I pass sentence, does the victim wish to make a statement? Amara stood, her hand resting on her pregnant belly, and walked slowly to the front of the courtroom. Every eye was on her as she turned to face not just Chaik, but the entire room, the cameras broadcasting this moment across the nation, and every woman watching who saw herself in Amara's story. What she said next would change everything. Don't forget subscribe and share this story to your loved ones. Amara's voice was steady as she began to speak, though her hands trembled slightly as they rested on her belly. My name is Amara Okonkwo. I am a magistrate judge. I have a law degree from the University of Lagos. I come from a loving family. I have spent years fighting for justice for women who have been abused by their partners. And I am a victim of domestic violence. The words hung in the air, simple but profound. She saw women in the gallery nodding, some with tears in their eyes. For years I have stood in courtrooms like this one and looked at women with bruises on their faces, fear in their eyes, and I have asked myself, why did she stay? Why didn't she leave the first time? Now I know the answer because I lived it. You stay because you remember who he used to be. You stay because you believe love can fix broken things. You stay because leaving feels like admitting failure. You stay because shame is a prison with invisible bars. Amara turned to look directly at Chaik, who stood with his head bowed, tears streaming down his face. Chaik Okafor was not always a monster. When I met him, he was kind, ambitious, and full of dreams. But somewhere along the way, he lost himself. He started drinking. He became jealous of my success. And instead of seeking help, instead of communicating, instead of walking away when he knew our marriage was dying, he chose violence. Her voice hardened slightly. The first time he hit me, I was shocked. I told myself it was a mistake, that the man I loved would never do it again. But he did. Again and again, the violence escalated. And each time, I found a reason to stay. I told myself I could fix him. I told myself that leaving would mean I had failed, that a judge who couldn't save her own marriage had no business advising other women. I wore long sleeves to hide my bruises. I smiled at work while dying inside at home. I became an expert at hiding the truth. Amara's voice broke slightly, but she continued. The night he put me in a coma, I was 6 months pregnant with our daughter. I had confronted him about his infidelity, about a woman named Gloria who made him feel like a man in ways I apparently couldn't. His response was to beat me unconscious. I woke up 5 days later, grateful to be alive, grateful that my baby survived, but completely broken by the realization that I had allowed this to happen. Not once, but repeatedly over years. She turned back to address the courtroom. I want every woman watching this to understand something. Domestic violence does not discriminate. It doesn't care about your education, your income, your position, or your strength. It can happen to anyone. And if it's happening to you, please know that it is not your fault. You are not weak for staying. You are not a failure for loving someone who hurt you. But you deserve better. You deserve safety. You deserve peace. And you deserve to leave. Justice Coker listened intently, his expression grave. Amara took a deep breath and continued. As for Chaik, I have forgiven him. Not because what he did was forgivable, but because carrying hatred would only continue to poison my life. Forgiveness is for me, not for him. But forgiveness does not mean there should be no consequences. She looked at Chaik one final time. You took away my sense of safety. You nearly took my life and the life of our daughter. You betrayed every vow you made to me. And in doing so, you proved that you are a danger not just to me, but to any woman who might ever trust you. I hope you use your time in prison to truly understand what you've done, to get help for your alcoholism and your violence, and to become the man you once pretended to be. Amara turned to Justice Coker. Your Honor, I ask that you sentence him to the full extent of the law. Not out of revenge, but because justice demands it. Because every woman watching needs to know that abuse has consequences, regardless of who the victim is. And because my daughter deserves to grow up in a world where violence against women is taken seriously. She sat down, her legs suddenly weak. Her mother reached over and squeezed her hand. The courtroom remained silent, everyone processing the raw honesty of her words. Justice Coker cleared his throat, his voice thick with emotion. Mrs. Okonkwo, this court thanks you for your courage in speaking today. Your words will undoubtedly help many women find the strength to leave dangerous situations. He turned his attention to Chaik. Mr. Okafor, you have pleaded guilty to attempted murder and aggravated assault. You have heard your victim's statement. Do you have anything to say before I pass sentence? Chaik looked up, his face ravaged by tears and remorse. I have no words that can undo what I've done. Amara is right about everything. I was jealous. I was weak. I drowned my inadequacies in alcohol and took out my frustration on the woman who loved me most. I destroyed the best thing that ever happened to me. His voice cracked. I don't ask for mercy. I don't deserve it. I only ask that somehow our daughter grows up knowing that her father was once a good man who made terrible choices, and that she never ever accepts violence from anyone. Amara, if you can hear me, I am truly sorry. You deserved so much better than what I gave you. Justice Coker nodded solemnly. Chaik Okafor, this court has considered your guilty plea, your victim's statement, and the severity of your crimes. You beat your pregnant wife into a coma, nearly killing both her and your unborn child. You violated the trust that marriage requires and the safety that every person deserves in their own home. This court sentences you to 15 years imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 10 years, contingent upon completion of substance abuse treatment and anger management programs. The gavel struck, and Chaik's legs buckled. 15 years. His daughter would be a teenager before he was eligible for release. He would miss her entire childhood, miss watching her grow up, miss being a father in any meaningful way. As the guards moved to escort him away, Chaik looked one last time at Amara. She met his gaze, and in her eyes he saw not hatred, but a profound sadness for what they had both lost. Then she looked away, and he knew with absolute certainty that she was done. Their marriage was over. She would move on, raise their daughter, and build a beautiful life without him. He had gambled everything on his pride and his weakness, and he had lost. Outside the courtroom, reporters swarmed Amara, but she made only a brief statement. Today, justice was served. But more importantly, today I reclaimed my voice and my power. I am not just a victim. I am a survivor. And I will continue to fight for every woman who finds herself trapped in a violent relationship. Thank you. As she walked away, supported by her parents, the crowd that had gathered began to applaud. Women held up signs that read, "We stand with you, Judge Okonkwo," and "Survivors are heroes." It was a moment of collective healing, a recognition that even the strongest among us can fall, and that there is no shame in surviving. That evening, back at her parents' home in Enugu, Amara sat on the veranda watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Her daughter kicked vigorously, as if celebrating their freedom. For the first time in years, Amara felt truly at peace. The road ahead would not be easy. She would have to rebuild her life, raise a child alone, process her trauma, and find her way back to the woman she had been before Chike's violence had diminished her. But she was alive. Her daughter was alive. And that was enough to start with. Her mother brought her a cup of tea and sat beside her. "You were very brave today, my daughter. Your father and I are so proud of you." Amara smiled, tears in her eyes. "Mama, I wasted so many years being afraid. But not anymore. From now on, I choose life. I choose peace. I choose my daughter. And I choose myself." As the sun dipped below the horizon, Amara placed both hands on her belly and whispered a promise to the daughter she would soon meet. "Chidinma, you will grow up knowing your worth. You will never accept violence or disrespect from anyone. You will be strong, but you will also know when to ask for help. And you will understand that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from what's destroying you." Before we continue with the next chapter, let us know what you think in the comments. Would you have been able to forgive like Amara did? Do you think the sentence was fair? And please, if this story is touching you or if you know someone who needs to hear it, share this video. You might just save a life. Don't forget to like and subscribe for the final chapters of this powerful story. 2 months later, on a warm December morning, Amara went into labor. Her mother rushed her to the mother and child hospital in Enugu, holding her hand through every contraction, whispering prayers and encouragement. After 8 hours of labor, Chidinma Okonkwo entered the world with a loud, healthy cry that seemed to announce her determination to live life on her own terms. When the nurse placed the baby in Amara's arms, time seemed to stop. Chidinma had her father's eyes and her mother's nose, a perfect blend of two people whose love story had ended in tragedy. But looking at her daughter's face, Amara felt no bitterness, only an overwhelming rush of love and fierce protectiveness. "Hello, my beautiful fighter," Amara whispered, tears streaming down her face. "We made it. We survived. And now we're going to thrive." Her parents crowded around, her father's stern face softening completely as he looked at his granddaughter. "She is beautiful, Amara. She has your strength. I can see it already." The first few weeks of motherhood were exhausting but transformative. Amara learned to navigate sleepless nights, endless diaper changes, and the particular anxiety that comes with being solely responsible for a tiny human. But she also discovered a reservoir of strength she hadn't known existed. Every time she looked at Chidinma, she was reminded of why she had fought so hard to survive, why she had finally found the courage to break free. News of Chidinma's birth spread quickly, and gifts poured in from all over Nigeria. Women's advocacy groups sent cards and baby clothes. Colleagues from the courthouse sent flowers and toys. Even some of the women Amara had helped over the years reached out to offer their support and share their own stories of single motherhood after leaving abusive relationships. One afternoon, as Amara nursed Chidinma on the veranda, her phone rang. It was an unknown Lagos number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. "Hello. Judge Okonkwo, my name is Gloria Adeola." The voice was young, tentative, filled with shame. "I'm the woman who. I was involved with your husband." Amara's first instinct was to hang up, but curiosity kept her on the line. "Why are you calling me?" "I need to apologize," Gloria said, her voice breaking. I know my apology means nothing. I know I contributed to the destruction of your marriage. But I've been carrying this guilt for months, and I needed you to know that I'm sorry. I didn't know he was violent. He told me you two were separated, that the marriage was already over. I know that's not an excuse, but it's the truth." Amara was silent for a long moment, processing. Finally, she said, "Gloria, my marriage didn't end because of you. It ended because Chike chose alcohol, violence, and betrayal over getting help and being honest. You were a symptom of a dying marriage, not the cause of its death. Still, I should have asked more questions. I should have been more careful." Gloria paused. "I saw your statement at the sentencing. It was powerful. It made me realize how many red flags I ignored, how I enabled his lies because it was easier than facing the truth. I'm in therapy now, working on understanding why I was willing to be someone's secret." "That's good," Amara said quietly. "We all have to face our own truths. Mine was that I stayed too long with a man who was hurting me. Yours is different, but no less important to confront." After they hung up, Amara sat for a long time, watching Chidinma sleep peacefully in her arms. She had expected to feel anger toward Gloria, but instead she felt something closer to pity. They had both been caught in Chike's web of dysfunction, both had made choices they regretted, both had to find their way forward. In January, Amara received word that she was being considered for a promotion to High Court judge, a significant advancement in her career. The Judicial Committee wanted to interview her, but they also wanted to address what they delicately called recent events, and whether she felt ready to return to work. The interview took place in a conference room in Abuja. 5 senior judges sat across from her, their faces a mixture of concern and professional curiosity. Chief Judge Adewale, who chaired the committee, spoke first. "Judge Okonkwo, we want to begin by saying that this committee has the utmost respect for your courage and your continued commitment to justice. However, we need to understand whether you feel prepared to return to the bench, particularly given the nature of cases you typically handle." Amara had anticipated this question. She sat up straighter, Chidinma sleeping in a carrier against her chest. "Chief Judge, with all due respect, what happened to me doesn't make me less qualified to judge domestic violence cases. It makes me more qualified. I understand now, in ways I couldn't before, the complexity of these situations. I understand why women stay. I understand the shame, the fear, the hope that things will change. And I understand the courage it takes to finally leave." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "My experience has taught me that justice isn't just about punishment. It's about restoration, about helping survivors rebuild their lives, about creating systems that support women before they reach crisis point. If you appoint me to the High Court, I promise to use my experience to make our justice system more compassionate and more effective." The committee members exchanged glances. Judge Adenike Fashola, the only woman on the panel, leaned forward. "Judge Okonkwo, do you have any concerns about facing defendants who remind you of your ex-husband?" "Of course I do," Amara answered honestly. "But I've been in therapy since I woke up from my coma. I've done the work to separate my personal trauma from my professional responsibilities. If I ever feel that I cannot be objective in a case, I will recuse myself. But I don't believe my experience disqualifies me from service. If anything, it deepens my understanding of the issues at stake." 2 weeks later, Amara received the call. She had been appointed as a High Court judge, one of the youngest in Nigerian history. The news made national headlines again, but this time the story was about resilience, about a woman who had survived the worst and emerged stronger. Her swearing-in ceremony took place in March, a bright Saturday morning filled with sunshine and hope. Amara wore traditional Igbo attire, her mother's coral beads around her neck, Chidinma strapped to her back in colorful Ankara fabric. As she took her oath of office, her voice rang out clear and strong across the crowded hall. "I, Amara Okonkwo, do solemnly swear that I will faithfully execute the duties of High Court judge, and will to the best of my ability preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria." The applause was thunderous. Women in the audience stood, some crying, others ululating in celebration. This was more than just a judicial appointment. This was a symbol of survival, of refusal to be defined by victimhood, of transformation from pain into purpose. Among the crowd was Blessing, the woman whose life Amara had changed 5 years earlier. She brought her daughters, now teenagers, who had never known their abusive father. "See that woman?" Blessing told her girls, pointing to Amara. "That's what strength looks like. That's what it means to choose yourself and your children. Never forget this day." That evening, at the celebration dinner her parents hosted, Amara stood and raised a glass of palm wine. "To everyone here who supported me through the darkest time of my life, thank you. To my parents, who taught me that dignity is more valuable than any title. To my colleagues, who showed me that asking for help is not weakness but wisdom. And to my daughter, Chidinma, who saved my life by giving me a reason to keep fighting." She paused, emotion catching in her throat. "Chike took many things from me. My sense of safety, years of my life, my trust in love. But he couldn't take my spirit. He couldn't take my purpose. And he couldn't take my future. Today, I reclaim everything he tried to destroy. Today, I stand before you not as a victim, but as a survivor, a mother, and a judge who will spend the rest of her career ensuring that other women find the courage to reclaim their lives too." As the guests raised their glasses in toast, Amara looked down at Chidinma sleeping peacefully in her grandmother's arms. Her daughter would grow up hearing this story, the story of how her mother survived, how she transformed pain into purpose, how she refused to let violence have the final word. In a prison cell in Lagos, Chike heard about Amara's appointment from another inmate who had seen it on the news. He sat on his bunk, staring at the gray walls that would be his home for at least a decade, and understood fully what he had thrown away. While he rotted in prison, paying for his crimes, Amara was rising higher than ever, proving that his violence had not broken her, only revealed her extraordinary strength. He had thought her success diminished him. Now he understood that her success had nothing to do with him at all. She had always been extraordinary. He had just been too insecure to see it, too weak to celebrate it, too broken to deserve it. Some lessons come too late to change anything. Chike's was one of them. 3 years passed like the turning of seasons, some days heavy with memory, others light with new beginnings. Chidinma grew into a precocious toddler with her mother's intelligence and an infectious laugh that could brighten the darkest days. She knew nothing of the violence that had marked her entry into the world, only the abundance of love that surrounded her from her mother, grandparents, and the extended community that had embraced them both. Amara had settled into her role as High Court judge with a passion and effectiveness that exceeded even her own expectations. Her courtroom became known as a place where justice was tempered with understanding, where survivors were treated with dignity, and where abusers faced consequences that were both firm and designed to promote genuine rehabilitation. She had also become a voice for change beyond the courtroom. She wrote articles, gave speeches at conferences, and worked with women's organizations to reform domestic violence laws. Her testimony before the National Assembly had helped pass stricter legislation protecting victims and holding perpetrators accountable. The Amara's Law, as it became known informally, mandated counseling services for victims, harsher penalties for repeat offenders, and better training for law enforcement in handling domestic violence cases. One humid afternoon in June, Amara received an unexpected letter at her chambers. The return address showed it came from Kirikiri Maximum Security Prison in Lagos. She recognized the handwriting immediately. It was from Chike. She stared at the envelope for a long time before opening it. Part of her wanted to throw it away unread, but curiosity and perhaps a need for closure made her break the seal. The letter was 5 pages long, written in Chike's careful script. "Dear Amara, I don't know if you'll read this, and I don't blame you if you throw it away. I have no right to your time or attention. But I've been working with a prison counselor for the past 2 years, and he suggested I write this letter as part of my rehabilitation, whether you read it or not. I want to start by saying that nothing I write here is an excuse for what I did. There is no excuse. I beat you. I nearly killed you and our daughter. I destroyed our marriage and threw away the most precious gift I was ever given, your love. In prison, I've had nothing but time to think about how I became the monster I was. The alcohol was part of it, but it wasn't the root cause. The root was my own insecurity, my inability to handle your success, my misguided belief that a man's worth is measured by how much more successful he is than his wife. I watched you shine, and instead of being proud, I felt diminished. Instead of celebrating you, I resented you. Instead of getting help for my feelings of inadequacy, I drowned them in alcohol and violence. I've been sober for 3 years now. I attend AA meetings here in prison. I've completed anger management courses and therapy. I'm learning to read and write better, taking correspondence courses to finish a degree I abandoned years ago. I'm trying to become the man I should have been all along, though I know it's far too late for us. I heard about your appointment to the High Court. I heard about Amara's law. I see the work you're doing to help other women, and I'm proud of you. I know I have no right to be, but I am. You've taken the worst experience of your life and used it to create change. That's the woman I married, the woman I was too blind to appreciate. I don't ask for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I only ask that you know I'm genuinely sorry, and that I hope Chidinma grows up strong and loved. I think about her every day, about the daughter I'll never really know, the father I'll never be. That's my punishment, far worse than these prison walls. If you ever decide she should know about me, please tell her that her father made terrible mistakes, but that she should never make my mistakes. Tell her that real strength is admitting when you need help. Tell her that love never involves violence. Tell her that a partner's success is something to celebrate, not resent. I don't expect you to respond to this letter. I just needed you to know that I understand now what I couldn't understand then, that you were never my enemy. My enemy was always myself. I wish you every happiness, Amara. You deserve all the good things life can offer. Tyke. Amara set the letter down, surprised to find tears on her cheeks. They weren't tears of love or longing, but something more complicated, grief for what might have been, recognition of genuine change too late to matter, and a final release of the bitterness she hadn't realized she was still carrying. She folded the letter carefully and placed it in a locked drawer of her desk. Someday, when Chidinma was old enough, she would let her daughter read it and make her own judgments about the father she had never known. But for now, it was simply a marker of closure, a period at the end of a painful chapter. That evening, as Amara gave Chidinma her bath, her daughter looked up at her with those wide, curious eyes that saw everything. "Mama, why are you sad?" Amara smiled, touched by her daughter's perceptiveness. "I'm not sad, my love. I'm just thinking about how far we've come, you and I." "Are we going somewhere?" Chidinma asked, confused. "No, baby. We're already where we need to be. We're home. We're safe. We're loved. That's everything." Later that night, after Chidinma was asleep, Amara stood on the balcony of their home in Enugu, a beautiful house she had purchased with her own money, in her own name, a sanctuary that belonged only to her and her daughter. The night air was cool and fragrant with night-blooming jasmine. In the distance, she could hear the sounds of the city settling into evening. Music, laughter, the hum of life continuing. Her phone rang. It was Judge Ngozi calling to discuss an upcoming case. As they talked shop, debating legal precedents and strategies, Amara felt a profound sense of contentment wash over her. This was her life now. Meaningful work, genuine friendships, a daughter she adored, and a hard-won peace that no one could take from her. When Chaik became eligible for parole 7 years later, there was a hearing to determine whether he should be released. Amara was invited to provide testimony, and after much consideration, she decided to attend. The parole boardroom was smaller and less formal than a courtroom, but the weight of the decision being made was no less significant. Chaik looked older, his hair graying at the temples, his body thinner but stronger from years of prison labor and exercise. When he saw Amara enter, his eyes widened with surprise. She had not told anyone she was coming. The parole board chair invited her to speak. Amara stood, aware that her words would determine whether Chaik walked free or remained imprisoned for 3 more years. "Members of the board," she began, her voice steady, 10 years ago, the man sitting before you nearly killed me. He beat me into a coma while I was 6 months pregnant with his child. I have scars, both visible and invisible, that will never fully heal. My daughter grew up without a father because of his choices." She paused, looking directly at Chaik. "But I've also read the reports from his counselors. I've seen the evidence of his rehabilitation, his sobriety, his education, his participation in programs to help other men understand the roots of their violence. I've read letters from fellow inmates who say he has mentored them, helped them choose different paths. Amara took a deep breath. I believe in justice, but I also believe in redemption. Not because people deserve it, but because society is better when people are given a chance to become better versions of themselves. Chike Okafor destroyed my life once. I don't believe he will do it again, not because I trust him personally, but because I've seen genuine evidence of change. She turned to address the board fully. I support his parole, with conditions, continued therapy, regular sobriety checks, and a restraining order that keeps him away from me and my daughter unless she chooses to reach out to him when she's an adult. He can rebuild his life, but it must be separate from ours. The room was silent. Chike's hands trembled in his lap, tears streaming down his face. He mouthed, "Thank you," to Amara, but she had already looked away. This wasn't about him anymore. It was about her own journey toward complete freedom, and freedom meant releasing the last chains of bitterness. 3 months later, Chike was released. He found work as a counselor at a rehabilitation center, helping other men struggling with addiction and anger. He never tried to contact Amara or Chidinma directly, respecting the boundaries she had set. But every month, he sent a check to a bank account established for Chidinma's education. It wasn't much, but it was consistent, a tangible demonstration that he took his responsibilities seriously, even if from a distance. On Chidinma's 10th birthday, she asked her mother about her father for the first time. They were sitting under the mango tree in their backyard, eating cake and watching the sunset. "Mama, why don't I have a daddy like my friends?" Amara had prepared for this moment for years, but her heart still clenched. She pulled Chidinma close. "You do have a father, sweetheart. His name is Chike. But he made some very serious mistakes when you were a baby, and he hurt me very badly. So he couldn't live with us anymore." "Did he go to jail?" Chidinma asked with a child's blunt curiosity. "Yes, he did. For a long time. But he's out now, and he's trying to be a better person." "Do you think I'll ever meet him?" Amara stroked her daughter's hair, choosing her words carefully. "When you're older, if you want to meet him, I won't stop you. That will be your choice to make. But I need you to understand something very important. What he did to me was wrong. Love should never hurt. Violence is never okay. And you should never accept less than you deserve from anyone." Chidinma nodded seriously, processing this information with the wisdom of a child who had been raised to think critically. "I think I want to wait until I'm grown up. Right now, I like things just the way they are. You and me and Grandma and Grandpa. We're enough." Amara hugged her daughter tight, blinking back tears. "Yes, my love. We are more than enough." Years continued to pass. Chidinma grew into a remarkable young woman, sharp, compassionate, and fiercely independent. She excelled in school, particularly in debate and public speaking, showing early signs of following in her mother's footsteps. At 16, she won a national essay contest on social justice, writing about the importance of supporting domestic violence survivors. When she graduated from secondary school at 18, Chidinma made a decision that surprised everyone. She wanted to meet her father. Amara's first instinct was to protect her daughter from potential disappointment, but she remembered her own words years earlier. This was Chidinma's choice to make. The meeting took place in a neutral location, a quiet cafe in Lagos with Amara waiting outside in the car, ready to intervene if needed but giving her daughter space to navigate this moment on her own terms. Chike arrived early, nervous and unsure. When Chidinma walked in, tall, confident, looking so much like her mother, he stood abruptly, knocking over his water glass. "Chidinma," he breathed, his voice breaking. She studied him with intelligent eyes that missed nothing. "Hello, Chike," she said, deliberately not calling him father. "I'm here because I have questions, and I think you owe me honest answers." For the next 2 hours, they talked. Chidinma asked hard questions about his violence, his choices, his rehabilitation. Chike answered honestly, holding nothing back, not trying to excuse himself or minimize what he had done. He showed her letters he had written over the years but never sent, photographs he kept of her taken from newspaper articles about Amara's work, evidence of a father who had missed everything but had paid attention from afar. "I don't expect you to forgive me," Chike said finally. "I don't even expect you to see me again after today. But I want you to know that my greatest regret is that my mistakes cost me the chance to know you. You're extraordinary, Chidinma. You're everything your mother is and more. Chidinma was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something that surprised even herself. I don't know if we'll have a relationship. I don't know if I can call you father or if you'll be part of my life. But I believe people can change. My mother taught me that. She also taught me that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and compassion doesn't mean accepting what's unacceptable. So maybe we start here. Maybe we have coffee once a month, and we see if there's something worth building. Or maybe this is enough, knowing who you are and that you're trying. I don't know yet. It wasn't the tearful reunion of movies, but it was real and honest and more than Chaik had any right to hope for. When Chidinma left the cafe, Amara was waiting with open arms. How was it? She asked. Hard, Chidinma admitted. But good. Mama, thank you for letting me make this choice. And thank you for being strong enough to leave when you did. You saved both our lives. Amara held her daughter close, this magnificent young woman who had been forged in trauma but defined by love. You saved mine too, baby. The moment I knew you existed, I knew I had to fight. You gave me a reason to choose life. 5 years later, at her mother's 60th birthday celebration, Chidinma stood to make a toast. She was now a law student herself, preparing to take the bar exam, engaged to a kind man who treated her with the respect and equality her mother had taught her to demand. To my mother, Chidinma said, raising her glass as hundreds of guests listened, who showed me that strength isn't about never falling, it's about rising every time you fall. Who taught me that justice isn't just about punishment, but about healing and restoration. Who proved that our worst moments don't define us, our choices after those moments do. Mama, you are my hero, my inspiration, and my guiding star. Everything good in my life exists because you refuse to give up. I love you. As the room erupted in applause, Amara looked around at the life she had built from the ashes of trauma. Her parents, elderly but still strong. Her colleagues, who had become family. The countless women whose lives she had changed through her work. And most of all, her daughter, brilliant, compassionate, whole. That night, after the guests had left and the house was quiet, Amara sat alone in her study, looking at the letter Chaik had sent years ago, now yellowed with age. She read it one final time, then placed it carefully in a box with other mementos from that period of her life. Not to forget, but to remember. To remember how far she had come. To remember that survival is possible. To remember that even from the deepest darkness, light can emerge. She closed the box and placed it on a high shelf. Tomorrow, she would return to court, to the work that gave her life meaning. Tomorrow, she would continue fighting for women who needed someone to believe in them the way she had needed someone to believe in her. Tomorrow, she would keep building the legacy she wanted to leave behind. But tonight, she simply sat in grateful silence, acknowledging the journey that had brought her here, the pain that had nearly destroyed her, the strength that had saved her, and the love that had redeemed everything. She was Judge Amara Okonkwo, survivor, mother, advocate, and living proof that no matter how drunk with rage your husband becomes, no matter how dark the night, no matter how impossible escape seems, there is always a path forward. You just have to be brave enough to take the first step. And that first step, she had learned, begins with a simple truth. You deserve better. You deserve safety. You deserve peace. You deserve life. The rest is just having the courage to claim it. Thank you for staying with us through this powerful journey. If this story touched you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Your share could save a life. Subscribe to our channel for more compelling stories that matter. And remember, if you or someone you know is experiencing domestic violence, please reach out for help. You are not alone, and you deserve better. Leave a comment below sharing what this story meant to you. Your voice matters, and your story could inspire someone else to choose freedom. God bless you all.